Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cinema Chat, my weekly movie podcast thing, and we are on episode 10 today. Hooray, awesome, dope ass milestone for you today. And, well, we got a great one for you today. We'll be talking about the man, the myth, the legend, Christopher Nolan. Yes, one of the most talked about directors over about the past 20 years or so, always doing something interesting, always something unique, and always something worth checking out and talking about. So, yep, we will be discussing all 12 films he has made today due to the release of his new film, Oppenheimer, which I do have a full review for Oppenheimer if you would like my full in depth thoughts on this film. But otherwise, yes, we will just be going through all 12 films, and I will be ranking them from worst to best. And I will say, I don't think he has a single bad film. I would say they go from good to, well, one of my all time favorite films. So, yeah, a very, very solid director in Christopher Nolan. And I will say this, too. I'm not. I guess I'm not as big of a Christopher Nolan fan as I thought I was when rewatching some of these movies. Now, some of these movies I did like more on my repeat viewings of them this time than I ever have before. There are some movies, one in particular I liked less than I had before, and then there was four first time watches for me, Oppenheimer not included. So yeah, four of these movies are fresh watches from Christopher Nolan for me. So, yep. So let's just kick this thing off. Coming in 12th place, which I guess is a little bit unfair, but it will be his first film following, right? So, yeah, like, excuse me. I just did a yawn. Anyways, yes, following. Um, this is Christopher Nolan's first film. I think it's only like an hour long, if I remember correctly. Let me just check real fast if I can. Huh. Oh yeah, 69 minutes. Haha, 69 LOL. Anyways, yeah, it like an hour and 10-minute long movie. So it's not like a full length movie. It's kind of like a short, I guess. I don't really know how to describe it. Super low. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cinema Chat, my weekly movie podcast thing, and we are on episode 10 today. Hooray, awesome, dope ass milestone for you today. And, well, we got a great one for you today. We'll be talking about the man, the myth, the legend, Christopher Nolan. Yes, one of the most talked about directors over about the past 20 years or so, always doing something interesting, always something unique, and always something worth checking out and talking about. So, yep, we will be discussing all 12 films he has made today due to the release of his new film, Oppenheimer, which I do have a full review for Oppenheimer if you would like my full in depth thoughts on this film. But otherwise, yes, we will just be going through all 12 films, and I will be ranking them from worst to best. And I will say, I don't think he has a single bad film. I would say they go from good to, well, one of my all time favorite films. So, yeah, a very, very solid director in Christopher Nolan. And I will say this, too. I'm not. I guess I'm not as big of a Christopher Nolan fan as I thought I was when rewatching some of these movies. Now, some of these movies I did like more on my repeat viewings of them this time than I ever have before. There are some movies, one in particular I liked less than I had before, and then there was four first time watches for me, Oppenheimer not included. So yeah, four of these movies are fresh watches from Christopher Nolan for me. So, yep. So let's just kick this thing off. Coming in 12th place, which I guess is a little bit unfair, but it will be his first film following, right? So, yeah, like, excuse me. I just did a yawn. Anyways, yes, following. Um, this is Christopher Nolan's first film. I think it's only like an hour long, if I remember correctly. Let me just check real fast if I can. Huh. Oh yeah, 69 minutes. Haha, 69 LOL. Anyways, yeah, it like an hour and 10-minute long movie. So it's not like a full length movie. It's kind of like a short, I guess. I don't really know how to describe it. Super low budget, but it is an interesting concept. Has some of those like Nolan staples, I guess, if that makes sense. So yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. Basically, is just like this ultra low budget film that kicked off Christopher Nolan. Is basically what I watched it as, and that's basically what I got out of it. Do I ever see myself rewatching Following? Probably not, but for Christopher Nolan's first film, I thought it was decent and it was an interesting experience nonetheless. I don't really have much to say about it because I don't know. I just don't have a whole lot to say about it, I guess. Number 11. This one might get me into a bit of trouble, but number 11 is going to be Memento for me. I know a lot of people adore Memento. Look, I've watched this movie 3 times now, and I can't get there. Like, yes, is it interesting that the movie goes in reverse? Correct. But that just kind of seems like a gimmick for me for the film, right? Like, otherwise it just seems like this kind of stereotypical, not stereotypical, but like your typical murder mystery where you're trying to figure out who killed this guy's wife, but it's just told in reverse, if that makes sense. And so, oh, we know who killed this guy's wife, but how did he figure it out? Like, that's basically what this movie is to me. I mean, sure, there's a lot of interesting elements with, like, tattooing himself, so he, like, keeps all this information. And just, like, the cast here is pretty good. Like, you got, crap, I can't remember the actor's name. Guy Pearce, that's his name. Guy Pearce is in here. Joe Pantoliano, that's how you say his name. But yeah, I like him in things that he pops up in. But Guy Pearce, obviously, main member of this story. But yeah, I've just never been all that enamored with Memento. Again, it's a good film, decent. I would definitely rewatch this one over Following, but I would definitely classify this movie as overrated if it were up to me, and hey, in this case it is. Number 10 is going to be Dunkirk. This was another first time watch for me. I don't know if I said, but Following was a first time watch for me, but Dunkirk was a first time watch for me. And I'm not that big on war movies, right? There are very few war movies I like, and the ones I like love them. Like, war movies are extreme, like, hit or miss for me. Like, I just think they're okay, decent. I'll watch them, never watch them again, or it's a movie that I adore and love, right? So, some good examples of that are 1917 and, Inglourious Bastards. Those are, like, 2 of my all-time favorite films. Any other war movie besides that? Not really my thing, and this movie kind of falls into that. So just like the nature of war films, not really my thing. And this movie, I feel like it's just more about, like, the experience of being in war, more so than having, like, an actual story. You know what I mean? So yeah. Sorry for yawning again. I'm very tired today, but I have to get this done, so I'm going to. Yeah. One thing that, I mean, it can work in pieces in a Nolan film. It doesn't really work for me in Dunkirk, and we'll get to it later in a movie. But there are, like, 3 separate timelines going in this movie, and just like the way they all merge together and stuff, it didn't fully work for me. Um, so this movie's just more of an experience, as far as I'm concerned, instead of like having one of those Nolan concepts, where he takes something and just adds this extra layer to it that makes it even better. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. Dunkirk. I wasn't really disappointed with this one, I would say. I would just say that it was about what I thought it was going to be, because I'm just not big into war movies. So, yeah. Number 9 is going to be the other first time watch for me. I guess I only watched 3 of these for the first time. I don't know where I got that 4 number from. But it's going to be Insomnia. Probably what I would say the least talked about Christopher Nolan film, honestly. Like, Memento is widely talked about. Following, pretty much talked about more because it's his first film. Dunkirk, I've heard about more because it's more recent. I remember when Dunkirk came out. But Insomnia, kind of, it doesn't really have that, like, classic Nolan twist on something, but it's still a very interesting, fun movie, like, interesting, fun little film, with Al Pacino and Robin Williams in here, like, kind of going back and forth at each other all movie. Yeah, I had fun with this one. It was a interesting story. You get like the Robin Williams as kind of against what Robin Williams normally does, where he's always like the funny joke guy in the films or whatever. In this movie, he's like your again, he's your what am I trying to say? He's like your antagonist kind of the film. So I thought that was different, doing something a little bit different with Robin Williams, but otherwise I would say this is just kind of more of a one of the more generic Nolan films, which the word generic doesn't really or shouldn't really go with Christopher Nolan because he always does something different, So that was kind of a disappointment for me, was that it was just kind of generic Nolan stuff, but nah, whatever. It was decent for what it was. Alright, number 8. The most disappointing movie out of all of Christopher Nolan's movies for me. That is going to be Tenet. Oh, Tenet. The movie that saved cinemas in 2020, or was supposed to save cinemas in 2020. Oh. So, Tenet. I've seen this movie about 4 times now. This is one of the most confusing movies I've ever seen in my life. To where I've seen, like I just said, I've seen the movie 4 times. I don't even feel comfortable trying to explain what this movie is about. Like, that's the most frustrating part of it, and that's like the main thing that holds this movie back for me, is just how confusing this movie is. Because, like, you have all this espionage stuff that you're doing. Like, you just have your typical espionage story. Then you also have the time inversion stuff, which, if you can't follow along with one of those 2 things, you will be lost for the rest of the film. And the film just keeps on going and never stops to let you catch up with it. And so, like, every time I watch this, I try focusing on one of them. So, like, this most recent time, I tried focusing more on the espionage stuff to understand what was going on. But then all the time inversion stuff started happening, and I just got hella confused. It's just so confusing. To where, like, I can get about 50% of what's going on in this film. The other 50%, I have no idea why things are happening. It's just like, oh, this looks cool, so I'm enjoying it, I guess. So, yeah, it's very disappointing. Because I feel like if I could understand this movie, it would be, like, 2 or 3 spots higher. Like, this is the cutoff between, like, what I would consider to be a good film and a great film. Like, I just think this movie is good. Everything from here on up, I would say, is great. So, it's just, It's frustrating. Besides that, I think the cast here does a really good job. Um, also another thing I will mention specifically on Tenet here, but I think this is just kind of a problem in a lot of Nolan films, especially his later ones, I would say, is the sound mixing. Like, in some of his films, I would say especially Dark Knight Rises, Tenet, Dunkirk, Oppenheimer, to like those ones especially. I think those are his last four films. Um, like characters will be talking and then there will just be like music that just like blares over it and you miss dialogue, and I've heard people like criticize, oh yeah, Tenet, I heard that, or that bothered me in Tenet. Oh, that happened to me in Oppenheimer. No, it's been like a problem for me for like the past 3 or 4 Nolan films, to where like I can't hear the dialogue because he's like focusing on score or the sound, and it really, really bugs me that that happens. So that's kind of like an overarching theme here for the more recent Nolan films, we'll go ahead and say. But we'll mention it here on Tenet because I think it's the biggest culprit of it. But anyways, I think John David Washington's cool in the film. Love Robert Pattinson. He's great as Batman 2. Pattinson, let's go, baby. Can't wait for Batman Part 2. But he's good in this. Elizabeth Debicki's great. Kenneth Branagh is a terrifying villain. He's a great villain in this film. The action is cool, but I can't tell you what it means. So, yeah, that's Tenet there for you. All right, coming in 7th place. This one might be a little bit controversial just based off of what I have above it. But number 7 is going to be Batman Begins. Yes, this is my least favorite of the Dark Knight trilogy. It's still a very solid film. I will say what I appreciate about this movie is that it shows the origin of Batman. Like, it's like the only Batman origin we've ever gotten in film. You know, like Michael Keaton was already just Batman. Ben Affleck was already just Batman. Robert Pattinson, already just Batman. But this one shows Christian Bale like becoming Batman, like with the League of Shadows and all that stuff. Like, I think that stuff is really cool and really interesting. Where this movie loses me is the third act. I've never thought that like putting this neurotoxin gas throughout Gotham was a very interesting villain plot. I just never buy it. Okay, like every time I watch this movie, I'm like along for the ride. Then you just get to that third act, I'm like, I don't really like this. I don't really like where this is headed. I don't like how like everyone's in Gotham is just going crazy now and attacking each other and whatnot. But it's I just don't like it, but I can still watch it and have a decent enough time with it, right? Like it doesn't derail the whole movie for me. I'm just not a big fan of it. That's really the only thing that holds this movie back from being even higher is just I just don't really care for that third act at all. But yeah, Batman Begins, an excellent start off to what most people would consider to be the greatest trilogy of all time, or a lot of people would say also the greatest comic book movie trilogy of all time, which it's got some competition with some other comic book franchises, I would say, or trilogies, I would say, but it's definitely up there for me as well. Right, number 6, The Dark Knight Rises, and I think I like this movie more than a lot of people do. I don't really know if that's due to nostalgia or whatever. Well, maybe not nostalgia. This is the one Dark Knight movie we didn't own when I was growing up. So I've seen this one the least out of the 3, but I really enjoy this movie. I really, really like it. I think Tom Hardy as Bane is incredible. You just get an amazing cast again in this movie. Like even some of your side characters like Joseph Gordon-Levitt or Ben Mendelsohn in here for a little bit. Like that's great. Also Anne Hathaway as Catwoman is incredible. I love her in this movie. And then you just get like all your returning cast, like Christian Bale, Morgan Freeman, Gary Oldman, and Michael Caine. Like they're all great in this entire franchise. So, or this whole trilogy, I should say. They're all great, but again, they're just amazing in this film as well. Bane. This version of Bane, I will say, is one of my favorite Batman villains. I just I don't know, just something about this movie just makes it work. It feels like a really epic and satisfying conclusion to the Dark Knight trilogy for me personally. A lot of people say that there's like plot conveniences and stuff in this film, and to a certain extent, I can see them, but most of the time, they don't bother me. It's just like one of those films where, like, yes, I understand that there are like flaws and stuff in it, but they're not flaws that bother me. Like everyone has like those movies that you just love, even though they're flawed, and you'll like never, and you'll like never defend them from those flaws, but those flaws just don't bother you. Like there are plenty of movies that I can say that about, right? Dark Knight Rises is just one of those movies. So I would say that this movie's a little bit underrated, or maybe not underrated, but overhated, I would say. But yeah, I think Dark Knight Rises is also an incredible film. I'm going to take a quick drink of water before we talk about the top 5 Nolan films. Alrighty. Coming in number 5 is going to be the new one, Oppenheimer. I thought this movie was excellent. I do have my full review, so I'm just going to echo a lot of the thoughts that I had basically in that. But the cast here, incredible. Cillian Murphy is amazing as Oppenheimer. The rest of the cast is stacked and just incredible. Like, I could probably spend the next 20 minutes just listing off the cast member names, but yeah, the cast in this film is huge and just amazing. Anyways, yeah, but standouts for me were Cillian Murphy, Robert Downey Jr. was a big standout, Matt Damon, favorite actor of all time, love that guy. When you get to see the bomb go off, it's one of the best things I've seen in a theater this year. What else did I have to say about it? It's got a lot of really good, like, thought-provoking things in this film, where it's a movie that will make you think as you go along with it. I like how it didn't romanticize anything and just felt, well, very realistic. Really, my only flaw with this film is I just didn't like that it told this film out of order. I would have really preferred if they did this entire movie in chronological order instead of having 3 separate timelines going on at once. Like, that was just my biggest thing that I did not like about this film. So, I know that was a very brief review of Oppenheimer, but I have like a full 15 or so minute review on Oppenheimer. So, yeah, number 5, Oppenheimer. Alright, top 4. These top 4 are pretty stacked. My 3 and 4 are kind of interchangeable, and then number 2 is clearly number 2, and number 1 is always and forever going to be number 1 for me. You'll understand when we get there, but yeah, number 3 and number 4 are 2 movies that I've grown to appreciate the more times that I've watched them. So, yeah, number 4 for me right now is going to be Interstellar. This movie is visually a masterpiece. It just looks beautiful. I definitively say this is probably the most beautiful looking movie from Mr. Nolan. Matthew McConaughey gives a fantastic performance in here. The whole, like, I don't know, extended cameo from Matt Damon in this movie's incredible and puts a grin on my face. I was not expecting him in this movie the first time I watched it, and I was, like I just said with Oppenheimer, that guy's my favorite actor of all time, so hey, I will not complain about Matt Damon being in a film. So that was incredible. Just like this whole story about like trying to save, Earth, and just like the space travel and the way they like mess with time on the different planets and stuff, and just like this is probably like the most emotional Nolan film because you get to see that mostly through Matthew McConaughey's performance. It it's just awesome. This movie is just awesome. Really, the only thing that I do not like about this film is kind of the whole fifth dimension thing at the end. Isn't really, it, I just don't like it all that much. But I understand how it fits into the story and like why it's there and all that fun stuff. Like I get it. I don't know. It just has never fully worked for me. But I still love this movie. I think it's incredible either way. So yeah, Interstellar is number 4. Number 3, a movie that I have slowly gained a love for over the many times that I have watched it. I've probably seen this movie about 5 times now. And every time I watch it, I like it a little bit more. This is a movie I just used to like, but now I would say I would love it. That's going to be Inception. A lot of people consider this to be Christopher Nolan's magnum opus. It's a lot of people's favorite film by Nolan, or maybe not a lot of people, but some people's favorite film by Nolan. And yeah, it is great. It is a great action film. It's a great concept. This is probably the best concept for a Nolan film, I would say, or best like original concept for a Nolan film. You got a great cast here. I mean, the action's incredible. There is a lot of tension in this film. Like as soon as you start your mission, like stuff happens. Like immediately in the mission, that's like, oh, of course, bad stuff happened. Now this mission is going to be even harder. You know what I mean? It's a great film that really merits a good rewatch. That's a really good thing about Nolan's that like all of his films are better on rewatch because like the twist or like something that's going to happen later on when something gets revealed. It just makes the whole movie better, I think, when you watch it more times. But yeah, honestly, the biggest compliment I can give Inception is there's like my appreciation for it has just grown over time to where it's a movie I would say I genuinely love now. So yeah, Inception, a fantastic film from Mr. Nolan. All right, top 2, and these are both films I give 5 out of 5 to. Not many people can direct multiple movies I give 5 out of 5 to. So congrats to you, Mr. Nolan. You are one of the lucky human beings that I've given 2 of your films a 5 out of 5 rating to. But of course, it's very obvious to me which one is number 1. So number 2 is going to be The Prestige. This is a movie that I have watched countless times in my life. I'm not sure if I'm just going to be speaking out my ass right now, but I'm pretty sure this is my mom's favorite Christopher Nolan film. She just loves this movie. So she watches it, or did watch it a lot growing up, so I would see this movie a lot growing up. So it's a movie I have quite a bit of nostalgia for, but I think it's an incredible story. Just such an interesting story about like magicians and like doing these magic tricks and like 2 guys trying to outdo each other the whole time, and just like how far they will go to beat the other one is just like insane. You have probably the best twist or reveal Nolan ending in this film that just like reframes the entire movie, and the movie is so much better upon a second watch. Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale are awesome in this movie. It's just such a good movie that like every time I watch it, I love it even more. So yeah, The Prestige, it's incredible. I love this movie. I don't know if they've made a 4K for The Prestige yet, but I hope they do someday, because I would love to get The Prestige on 4K. Make a 4K steelbook for it. What's with all this shit where they don't make good movies on 4K, but we get shitty movies like I don't know, Morbius on 4K. Like, come on. Give me good movies on 4K, please. But of course, number one, which will probably always be my number one. Like, this movie's in my top 10 favorite films of all time. And of course, it is going to be The Dark Knight. You knew it was coming. This is most people's favorite Christopher Nolan film. This is most people's favorite comic book film of all time, right? And it certainly is up there for me, certainly top 5 favorite comic book films of all time for me personally. But The Dark Knight, like, what can I say about this movie that adds to the conversation about how incredible this film is, right? Just everything. This is one of those films that I consider to be perfect, that I genuinely would not change a single thing about, because I think it was just perfect. It is still perfect. Like, we're 15 years later, and this movie is still in the conversation for greatest superhero film of all time. So, I will say, not really a knock against the film, but people who still think that this is like the end-all be-all trump card and what's the best superhero film of all time conversation, like, come on. There are plenty of other superhero movies that deserve to be in that conversation for what's the best one. It's not an easy answer with just The Dark Knight anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's plenty of other superhero films that I could throw out that I would say are better, if not damn near as good as The Dark Knight. Like, I don't think it's just that easy to say it's definitively the best superhero movie ever made anymore. I don't it just isn't. But that's not a knock against the film. That's just, in general, just like, guys, there are other superhero movies that are freaking awesome too. So, this isn't the only one that's great. So that's that. But then, the main reason this is number one for me, besides it just being an awesome film, I've told this story before, I think, or explained my reasoning on this film before, but so The Dark Knight, right, came out in 2008.